Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wacky Wednesday, a weekly series where we explore wacky deck ideas in both Standard and Modern, and this week it's a blast from the past. We're taking a look at Caw Blade in Modern, which used to be a very popular deck in Standard back in the days, and of course Stoneforge Mystic is still banned in Modern, but with the addition of Jace the Mind Sculptor to the format we can once again start brainstorming and shuffling away additional copies of Squadron Hawk into our deck. So what's the basic premise of the Caw Blade deck? It's a blue-white control deck that's looking to take advantage of cards like Squadron Hawk, which can search up additional copies, along with cards like Trophy Mage in this case as a replacement for Stoneforge Mystic, which can search up powerful equipment like Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Feast and Famine, which we can equip onto our Squadron Hawks to start dealing a lot of damage and gaining incremental advantage. And then we have some powerful Planeswalkers to pull us ahead, especially Jace the Mind Sculptor's Brainstorm ability synergizes very nicely in our deck, where we have a lot of shuffle effects between our fetch lands, Squadron Hawks and Trophy Mages. So let's take a look at the entire list, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have of course our 4 copies of Path to Exile as a removal spell of choice. We also have 1 copy of Oust to complement our 4 Path to Exile, just to have an additional cheap removal spell. Then we have our 4 copies of Serum Visions to smooth out our draws, and 1 copy of Spell Snare as a counterspell for 2 mana cost cards, which are very prevalent in Modern. Then moving over to our 2-drops, we have a whole bunch of counterspells. We have 2 copies of Mana Leak, countering a spell unless the opponent can pay 3. We've got a Negate to counter non-creature spells, Remand, which doesn't technically counter the spell but just returns it to the opponent's hand, and we get to draw a card, so a nice way to buy some time against expensive spells. A Logic Knot, which is very powerful if we have a lot of cards in our graveyard, since we can delve to increase the cost of X, so we get to counter a spell unless the opponent pays X. And then 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage, which synergizes nicely with all our cheap instants and sorceries. Then we have our 4 copies of Squadron Hawk as 2 mana 1/1s, that when they enter the battlefield we can search our library for any number of them and put them into our hand. Do want to keep your hand size in mind so you don't end up discarding any copies, but they synergize very nicely with Jace's Brainstorm ability, since you can just put them back into your deck and then end up searching them up again when you cast a Squadron Hawk from your hand. Then moving on to our 3-drops, we have 3 copies of Trophy Mage, which is a 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield we can search our library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 3 and put it into our hand, so this does a decent Stoneforge impression as we get to search up Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Feast and Famine. And in the sideboard we even have a copy of Crucible of Worlds, which we can also search up. And then we also have 1 copy of Detention Sphere as a catch-all answer, and 1 copy of Gideon of the Trials, which has also proven itself in these blue-white control decks. Then onto our 4-drops, we have 2 copies of Supreme Verdict as our sweeper of choice, and of course our 4 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, which does everything we want in this deck, providing a lot of card advantage. And last but not least, we have 1 copy of Gideon Jura, which is an additional finisher that can also control the board and take out tapped creatures from the opponent. Then our mana base is pretty straightforward. We have 4 copies of Celestial Colonnade, which can turn into a 4/4 creature with flying and vigilance. We have 4 copies of Field of Ruin to deal with opposing non-basic lands, also provides a shuffle effect for Jace the Mind Sculptor. We also have 4 copies of Flooded Strand as our fetch land of choice, which can search up basics or Hallowed Fountains, and also provides a shuffle effect. And then we also have a 5th land destruction card in Ghost Quarter, which can also be very nice in combination with Crucible of Worlds out of the sideboard. And then 2 Glacial Fortress as check lands, 2 copies of Hallowed Fountain, which we can search up with our fetch lands as well. And then a whole bunch of basic lands, 5 islands, and 3 plains. Then taking a quick look at the sideboard, we have 2 copies of Dispel as a cheap counterspell for opposing control decks. We have Ceremonious Rejection against colorless decks like Affinity, Tron, and Lantern. We have a Rest in Peace as our graveyard hate of choice, Disenchant to deal with artifacts or enchantments. We've got 1 copy of Celestial Purge to deal with red and black permanents, pretty versatile, can deal with cards like Blood Moon, Liliana of the Veil, or even creatures like Death Shadow. We've got a Rune Halo, which can come in against creature matchups, but also against decks like Valakut, where you can name Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. We've got a Negate against non-creature spells. We've got a Crucible of Worlds, so we can replay our Field of Ruins over and over again. We've got a Timely Reinforcements against aggro decks and burn decks, and those tokens can also wield our swords nicely. We've got a Detention Sphere as another catch-all answer, Vendilion Clique, which shines in blue matchups, Wrath of God as an additional sweeper, and we're not playing an additional Supreme Verdict because of Meddling Mage, and then an Elspeth Sun's Champion, which also shines in creature matchups. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems fine. Got a little bit of everything, and we'll play the Colonnade tapped, say go. So next turn we can Serum Visions, or play the Squadron Hawk, probably just Serum Visions first though. Blackleaf Cliffs, and no turn 1 play, so we could be up against perhaps a Junt deck. I think we just Serum Visions, look for additional lands. And Jace, so let's bottom both here, we're just looking for lands. Play the Ghost Corridor, say go. So we could be in a bit of trouble if we miss land drops. What we could also do is path to exile our own Squadron Hawk just to get a basic land, but that's a bit clunky. And Inquisition now. We have plenty of spot removal, so they might just take the Squadron Hawk instead, or the Detention Sphere if they have a Planeswalker. Opponent does indeed take the Hawk, but given that our opponent didn't have an Inquisition on turn 1, I felt that it was pretty safe to keep the Hawk in hand for a turn, but as it turns out, our opponent perhaps drew the Inquisition there. So let's just play a tapped Colonnade, say go. And if our opponent doesn't present any pressure here and we draw a 4th land and start Jacing, I do like our chances. So no green mana yet from our opponent. And there's Liliana, so we do have the Detention Sphere to answer it. I think we just get rid of the Oust. I think Path is a bit better. Opponent discards Fatal Push, which doesn't do much here. But drawing a land here means I think we just slam Jace and start brainstorming. We can hopefully answer the Liliana next turn. Could also Fate Seal to put Jace out of bolt range, which is also reasonable, since our opponent's likely to have Lightning Bolt. Alright, let's Fate Seal our opponent. And Inquisition, do we want them to draw it? Not really, since that can take away Detention Sphere. So I think we do put that on the bottom here. And a Dark Confidant, that's fine. And does our opponent plus Liliana? They do. So let's get rid of the path here. And then hopefully next turn we can just answer both of our opponent's threats and start brainstorming. And Lightning Bolts could be redirected to Jace here. And our opponent did discard a Tarmogoyf, so they are missing green mana, which is good to know about. So let's untap, find a mana leak. Opponent could have a second Lightning Bolt, in which case Fate Sealing once again could be worth it, but at some point we want to start drawing extra cards with Jace, and I think now is the time. And don't think we want these mana leaks, so let's put those back, since we're just tapping out here. Could Snapcaster, Path to Exile, keep the Liliana around for a turn, but I would rather just answer everything right now, and then next turn have all our mana available to do proactive stuff. Opponent does get green mana, of course, here, because of our path, but with Jace and Snapcaster, I think we've got most creatures covered. A Bloodbraid Elf would be pretty painful here, I'll admit, since that could just take out the Jace right now. So let's see if they have it. Alright, they do. So the age-old battle between the 4-drops here in full display. Opponent finds a Tarmogoyf. So perhaps got punished there for our decision making last turn. So Jace goes down, but I still don't hate our spot here. Snapcaster answers Bloodbraid and Tarmogoyf all at once. And we've got another mana leak coming up, which isn't great, so we could shuffle that by playing the Trophy Mage here. But then we are taking a hit from our opponent's creatures, potentially. Can just Snapcaster Path. I kind of like playing Trophy Mage here, and then hoping our opponent doesn't have hand disruption to take away the Snapcaster Mage, since we don't really want to draw the other mana leak. So let's play Trophy Mage, search up Sword of Feast and Famine, which is great against an opponent that has mostly black and green creatures. Opponent could have access to Kolaghan's Command, which would be pretty painful, so hopefully we can avoid that situation. And there's a Thoughtseize, so that's pretty painful since that can now take the Snapcaster Mage, or they can go for the sword if they don't have an answer to the Trophy Mage otherwise. And they do in fact take the sword, alright, so that's fine. And another Bloodbraid. Oh dear. Reveals Dark Confidence. Alright, so all of a sudden we need to top deck a Supreme Verdict to get out of this. So we could trade for Bloodbraid, take 9 to 11. Then next turn we have Snapcaster Path for either the Goyf or the Dark Confidence. Or we just hope to top deck a Supreme Verdict and chum block the Tarmogoyf right now. I think we probably should just trade with the Bloodbraid here, give ourselves a few more outs than just hoping to top deck a Verdict. So let's untap, find a Jace. Alright, that's fine, but not great right now. I think we just need to snap Path. And then the question is, do we path the Confident or the Tarmogoyf? I think we actually path the Confident here, since our opponent has 0 cards in hand, so we might be able to outcard our opponents if they don't have the Confident in play. Don't think we need Ghost Quarter here, so let's just Snapcaster Path right now, since we don't want our opponent untapping with the Confident. And I think we path over Oust, even though we give our opponent an extra land. If our opponent doesn't draw anything powerful on their next turn, we could be back in it. Inquisition is fine, just takes our mana leak. So here we can trade with Bloodbraid and then use Jace to manage the Tarmogoyf. So this is fine. We are taking quite a big hit here, 6 down to 5. There we go, Squadron Hawk is an excellent draw. So I think we just Jace and bounce the Tarmogoyf first things first. And then next turn we can play the Squadron Hawks, brainstorm, start chumping, and slowly getting ahead. So hoping to dodge another Bloodbraid here. Just replace Tarmogoyf. And a tap land. Alright, so I like our chances now. Drew a Field of Ruin, which is also fine. So let's start by playing out Squadron Hawk. Think tapping the Ghost Quarter here. Got 2 copies left in the deck. And then we can brainstorm. And Trophy Mage is good here. So let's put back a Squadron Hawk and a Field of Ruin. And we could just snap Path here. Or we can play the Trophy Mage and get a sword, which seems pretty good here as well. I think I like that. This also shuffles our library, which we kind of want. Say go. So now we can just chump with one of our creatures. I think we actually chump with the Trophy Mage here, since the flying is actually pretty relevant. Opponent just passes. Alright, so what now? I actually don't mind using Jace to bounce the Goyf, just to get some breathing room, so that we don't die to a random series of removal spells. And then this turn we can deploy our sword, equip it, that seems fine. Hope they don't have a Fatal Push or Kolaghan's Command. Alright, we do get to connect, deal 2 to our opponent, draw a card. Excellent. Let's say go. Opponent replays the Goyf. And another land, so they are flooding a little bit here. Alright, another Squadron Hawk, so let's brainstorm first. Put back a Hawk and I think a Colonnade. Then we can play a Hawk, get one out of our deck, shuffle. And then we can still play Serum Visions. And Logic Knot's pretty good here actually. So let's bottom this, stop this. And then play the Stabbed since we don't want to die to a random Lightning Bolt. Attack for 3. Draw the Logic Knot. And then we have Logic Knot and Snapcaster Path at the ready. So that seems fine. Abrupt Decay on the sword. Can't counter that one. That's fine. So I think I like just Snapcaster Path here. Puts an additional creature into play, and then we can try to close out this game. No more basics for the opponents. Get to untap. And there we go, awesome, managed to beat Junt in a close game 1 there. We got to cast 2 Jaces, our opponent got to cast a few Blood Braids, and Jace came out on top. So up against Junt, how do we want to sideboard? So I don't love Remand in this matchup. The swords are pretty fragile if our opponent has cards like Kolaghan's Command, so we might want to take out the entire Trophy Mage package. Celestial Purge is a pretty easy addition, Elspeth is pretty good, and I don't mind additional Detention Spheres. Don't think we need Rest in Peace despite Tarmogoyf. I think that's about it. Then I think we also take out the Negate. Given that we're on the draw, perhaps we want to take out a Mana Leak. Could bring in additional sweeper effects like Wrath of God, maybe take out some Trophy Mages and Swords, and maybe bring in the Clique to pressure opposing Planeswalkers, but it's kind of bad against the Last Hope. Yeah, I think this is fine. So this hand's not perfect, but I think we're keeping. Double Squadron Hawk, you usually don't want to see, but if your opponent leads with the Thoughtseize or Inquisition, they might end up taking one, and then we have a backup. So they might just take the Snapcaster here, and they do just take the Snapcaster, which is the more obvious choice. Alright, so we could play a tapped Colonnade, but on turn 3 right now, it looks like we don't have anything to do besides play another Hawk, so I think it's fine to just fetch a basic island. Despite having the Jace in hand, we kind of want to save the fetches to an extent, but this deck has plenty of shuffle effects, and if we can avoid taking too much damage, that's probably worth it. Picked up a Gideon, Detention Sphere seems good. Colonnade's a bit awkward, since we kind of do want land number 4, but we don't want tap lands number 4. I think we'll bottom the Colonnade and top the Sphere. Say go. Raging Ravine, and no play from the opponents. That's good. So they might have a Liliana here, which is fine. I think I still play the Squadron Hawk and get 2 more. Liliana the Last Hope would be a bit more annoying than Liliana of the Veil here. But no play from the opponents, so they might have a pretty reactive hand, or a hand with lots of Bloodbraid Elves. First things first, I think we get in for 1. Then Serum Visions. And picked up a Sword of Feast and Famine. Definitely want the island, I don't think we want the Trophy Mage. Play a tap Colonnade, say go. So next turn we can play Jace if our opponent hasn't presented too many threats. And their opponent's just passing, interesting, so they probably have something like a Maelstrom Pulse or a Kolaghan's Command. So I fully expect our Jace to die immediately. Could keep the Squadron Hawk back on defense to chump a potential Bloodbraid Elf. Although I imagine our opponent would have played it last turn. Could Fate Seal to put Jace out of bolt range, but then he still dies to Maelstrom Pulse or Dreadbore. So let's play our Jace. And I think I just like brainstorming here, getting our extra card. I think we just put back 2 Squadron Hawks here. We'll keep the Hawk on defense in case our opponent animates Raging Ravine. Is this a Kolaghan's Command? Yep, and they're making us discard and dealing 2 damage, presumably to Jace here. That's fine. Could just discard a land, could discard our Squadron Hawk. I think I like discarding the Squadron Hawk here since we're drawing 1 next turn anyways. And Jace goes to 1, so they might have a second Kolaghan's Command coming up. If our opponent's tapped out and we can play and equip the Sword of Feast and Famine, that's a pretty big game. Just a Tarmogoyf. And is Jace gonna get to brainstorm once again? Seems unlikely. This must be a second Kolaghan's Command. Hopefully they don't kill the Hawk, and in fact they make us discard once again. So we will get a clean hidden with the Sword of Feast and Famine, which is great. So let's get rid of the Glacial Fortress, I think. And then next turn we can draw Squadron Hawk, fetch, equip Sword of Feast and Famine, untap and play Gideon. Or perhaps a Detention Sphere and a second Hawk. That seems pretty good. So let's get a Plains. Play the Sword. Equip. Attack. Let's see what our opponent discards first. Discards a land. Alright, so what now? We can Detention Sphere the Goyf, play another Hawk. That seems decent. Or we can play Gideon, but Gideon might actually die to Tarmogoyf plus Ravine here. So I kind of like just answering the Goyf. And then playing another Hawk. That way, if our opponent does have removal for the first Hawk, we can just equip the sword onto another one. I did also briefly consider adding a Mistveil Plains to the deck to shuffle Hawks from our graveyard back into our deck, but I don't think we want the additional tap land. And it's not like we have a ton of white permanents. Now we do with Detention Sphere, but that's because we sideboarded one in. Typically we only have our Gideons and Squadron Hawks. So I imagine the sword's gonna die here to something like a decay. Ooh, Golgari Charm, that's spicy. Destroys an enchantment. So just gets rid of the sphere, that's fine. Alright, picked up a fetch. So I think we start by attacking with just the equipped Hawk, and then we'll go from there. I guess we could have played our Gideon main phase in case we connect, since then we get to untap our lands here. But I think we have enough mana to do what we want to do anyways. And if our opponent ended up killing the sword, and there we go, Dreadboard discarded. Things could have ended up poorly. So let's fetch first, get a Plains, play Gideon, and plus. Probably should have Serum Visioned first, but our opponent just packs it in, so too much value from our sword. And there we go, managed to beat Junt featuring Bloodbraid Elf with our Caw Blade deck featuring Jace. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Don't think we can keep this hand with 5 lands, a sword with no creatures, and a Supreme Verdict. And alright, this hand's not great, but it'll do. And Oust. I think we keep the Oust on top since we don't really have answers to creatures otherwise. And a Flameblade Adapt. So we're up against the red-black hollow one deck, so we would usually like to keep Oust to maybe bounce something like a Gurmag Angler or a hollow one. But given our hand, I actually don't mind just using it on the Flameblade Adapt to prevent taking too much damage in the early game here. So let's search up a basic Plains, and we'll just oust the Adapt right away, and say go. Opponent cycles a Street Wraith, and replays an Adapt. So that's the one that we put on top most likely, and a tapped Blood Crypt. But now we get to keep up Remand to maybe counter something like a Goblin Lore, and Snapcaster is a nice draw as well, as we could flash back the Oust next turn. So hopefully this is a Goblin Lore and not a Burning Inquiry. Alright, let's Remand that. And there's Jace. So we only take 1 this turn. And a Ghost Corridor the draw. So we can just Snapcaster Oust here. And then next turn we'll have a mostly empty board for Jace, hopefully. Otherwise, we'll have to maybe use the -1 on Jace to bounce something like a Hollow One or Gurmag Angler, which is also fine. Just have to hope our opponent doesn't have more than one of them. And Field of Ruin can also force the opponent to shuffle, so we can permanently get rid of something like the Flameblade Adapt, but looks like our opponent's shuffling themselves, so they wouldn't be redrawing that Flameblade Adapt. Opponent fetches a second time, so they could just be hard casting one of their Delve creatures here. And yep, there's a Tasigur, so Jace is going to be great here, being able to -1 and bounce a Tasigur. I think we'll play Field of Ruin, keep the fetch land to shuffle away after we brainstorm. So let's play Jace, and we'll just return the Tasigur. And I think it's fine to attack here. We're still at 18, so Bloodcasts from the opponent don't have haste, and the only other haste creature has flying, so we can't block that anyways. Faithless Looting. And next turn we can brainstorm, shuffle with Flooded Strand, and play Gideon. And there's Bloodcast coming back from the graveyard. And another Flameblade Adapt. So I don't hate our chances here. So let's start by brainstorming. Opponent does have access to Lightning Bolt, but if they had one they would have already used it. And Path to Exile's great here, so we could keep a second copy of Jace here to play it safe. I think we'll get rid of the Mana Leak and the Ghost Corridor. Then we can fetch, get another basic, since the opponent could have main deck Blood Moons. And I think just get an island here. Play Gideon, And we'll plus, forcing the opponent's creatures to attack us. And we'll just keep our Snapcaster on defense here to maybe block the Bloodcast if the Flame Blade gets very large. So there's Burning Inquiry. Looks like we discarded 2 copies of Path to Exile, which is pretty painful since that card is very good against the opponent. And the Flame Blade Adapt grows up to a 4/2. But next turn we could actually use Jace to minus bounce our own Snapcaster Mage and flash back a Path to Exile. So that's something we have access to here. And opponent flashes back Faithless Looting, so the Flame Blade Adept will grow up to a 6-powered creature here. So if they find a Lightning Bolt, we could lose our Gideon. Opponent cycles Street Wraith, Flame Blade Adept up to 7 power. And the Hollow One, opponent's got 1 card left. We could block the Bloodcast with our Snapcaster, but then we can't do the trick where we bounce our own Snapcaster Mage. But I think that's still fine, just keeping our Gideon around for an extra turn seems worth it. Alright, so what's the play here? We can use Jace to bounce the Hollow One, opponent can just replay it for 5 mana, so that doesn't seem super enticing. So we could Serum Visions first and then Brainstorm, or we can Brainstorm first. I think I like Brainstorming first. And Path to Exile's perfect here, so let's put back, I think, just 2 planes. And then we can plus the Gideon, hope our opponent doesn't have another way to grow the Adapt. And then we can Path the Hollow One. And I think we use a Field of Ruin here as well, just to shuffle. So let's do that on the cliffs here. Get a planes. That way we get to shuffle before we cast Serum Visions, since we don't really want to draw those planes. Cast Serum Visions, and looks like our opponent is out of basic lands, so Field of Ruin is just a strip mine. Squadron Hawk is good here. Don't think we want to Spell Snare, so we'll bottom that and top the Hawk. And say go. And we have Logic Knot and Path to Exile up. Opponent does have a Bloodcast in the graveyard still, but we're at 17, so it won't have haste if it comes back. And no Phoenixes in the opponent's graveyard we need to worry about at the moment, so no need to Path the Hollow One until after attackers are declared. Alright, so Collective Brutality making us discard. Opponent doesn't have any Faithless Lootings left, so the Adept will only be attacking for 2 here. So I think it's fine to just counter the Brutality just to not lose those 2 points. And then we can still Path the Hollow One. Opponent's forced to attack Gideon. And now we can Path the Hollow One. So Gideon goes to 1 loyalty. We get to untap, play a Squadron Hawk, search up 3 more. Now we get to Brainstorm with Jace. And we can put back 2 copies of Squadron Hawk. Play Celestial Colonnade, I think. Use the Field of Ruin on the Blood Crypts. Search up another basic land. Now those Squadron Hawks are shuffled back into our deck. And I think we'll play another Squadron Hawk here just to be able to block the Adapt. And search up 2 more copies. And then plus our Gideon. And that way we get to keep Detention Sphere for a larger threat. And Ghost Quarter can also just take out one of the opponent's lands, so we can cut them off of black mana. The Adept is forced to attack, so unless the opponent picked up a Street Wraith that they can cycle, we will just trade 1 Hawk for the Adept. And all we need now, I guess, is a Trophy Mage or a Sword to close things out. Opponent does have the Stomping Ground, which brings back the Bloodcast. That's mostly there to flash back Ancient Grudge out of the sideboard. So let's untap. Let's start by Brainstorming. And there's a Sword, so we can put back 1 Hawk and a Colonnade. Then we get to play our Hawk. Search up our last copy. Play out our Sword. And I think we'll just Ghost Quarter our opponent's black source here. Equip the Sword. And alright, that does it. On to sideboarding against a red-black Hollow One. So this is definitely a matchup where we want our copies of Rest in Peace. Rune Tail is also pretty good. And Celestial Purge as well. I like Detention Sphere. And Elspeth can also be decent if our opponent doesn't have too many Phoenixes. Timely, I think, is also worth it if our opponent has a fast start. Disenchant could deal with Blood Moon and Hollow One, so that might be worth it. Although I'm less sure about that one. And Wrath of God is also fine, actually. So lots of options. Spell Snare can counter Collective Brutality and Goblin Lore, but is a bit narrow, so I can see taking that out. Remand is pretty good against the Delph threats, but I think on the draw we can take it out. And I think we can also shave a Negate here. Mana Leak seems fine. Squadron Hawk, we need a way to win the game, so I think those stay in. I could see shaving one Jace. Maybe we shave a Trophy Mage. Maybe we'll go without the Wrath of God. I think we'll cut down Trophy Mages and just keep in the Sword of Feast and Famine here. Just keep in one Trophy Mage, one Sword. And this hand seems fine. We've got 2 lands, lots of answers. Of course, a Burning Inquiry can drastically change our hand. Usually they don't play that one on turn 1 unless they've got a bunch of Hollow Ones in hand. It's tricky to play around Blood Moon with this hand, since we kind of want a Plains to be able to play out Runed Halo, but we kind of want to fetch Basic Island to play Serum Visions on turn 1 and for Logic Knot, so I think we just play the Hallowed Fountain for now, untapped, play Serum Visions, and hope to find more basics to inform our decision on what to fetch with the Flooded Strand. 2 islands on top, I think we want both here, and then we can always just shuffle if we don't want a second one, and then a Flooded Strand can maybe fetch up a Plains. Opponent with a Stomping Ground into Faithless Looting. Discards Brutality and Goblin Lore, so no recursive creatures in the graveyard yet. And is this a 1 mana Hollow One? It is. That's fine. Got plenty of answers to that one. So we could keep up a counterspell here and then take a hit from Hollow One, and then next turn answer the Hollow One, which seems fine here. So we'll say go here. Opponent with a Wooded Foothills. So Blood Moon seems unlikely given that they don't have any basic swamps available, so we probably don't need to worry about that one too much. And by waiting this turn and taking a hit, perhaps our opponent plays another Hollow One. Alright, our opponent does actually have the Blood Moon here, so we have a few options on how to deal with the Blood Moon. We can just fetch the basic Plains and ignore it, since we have 2 basics, but that kind of shuts off Ruined Halo and Logic Knot. We can Celestial Purge it, or we can just use one of our counter spells right now. I think we fetch a Plains here anyways, and then use Mana Leak to counter it. We'll take 4. And here I think I like just using Oust on the Hollow One and keeping up both Celestial Purge and Logic Knot. Opponent with a Looting, that's fine. So they will be able to replay a Hollow One, but we can use a Logic Knot if we want to. So our opponent's got 2 cards left in hand. If one of those is a second Hollow One, we would rather use a Ruined Halo here, but given that we have a Path to Exile, I think I'm fine just using our Logic Knot here. And then we'll get rid of Flooded Strand and think Mana Leak. Make our opponent pay 2. I don't think they'll play Simian Spirit Guide. So that's gone. Bloodghast comes back from the graveyard that they discarded, but we have either Celestial Purge or Ruined Halo to answer that one. So Ruined Halo is mostly here to name Bloodghast or the Phoenix, since our opponent has multiples of those and they're kind of hard to deal with spot removal spells. And there's Rest in Peace, so that's also pretty decent here. So let's play Rest in Peace, play Ruined Halo, naming Bloodghast, and say go. The Bloodghast will still be able to damage our Planeswalkers, which is relevant, but at least we won't be taking any damage from it. Opponent with 1 card left, and Path to Exile probably covers it. So now we just need to find a win condition. Don't think we'll be fetching with the Flooded Strand in case we draw a Jace. And just a hardcast Hollow One. So I think we'll just path that right now to free up our mana in case we pick up some expensive spells. And I don't think the extra land for the opponent makes a difference here. Alright, Timely Reinforcements is excellent here. Get to gain 6 and make 3 1/1s. And those 1/1s will be able to protect our Planeswalkers if we ever draw one. Opponents cycle Street Wraith. Opponents flooding quite a bit. Serum Visions is excellent, still not fetching first. And there's Jace, perfect. I don't think these lands do much, so we'll just bottom. And I think we're better off just playing the Jace right now, since we've got him protected. So let's get an island, play Jace, and we could Fate Seal to put him out of bolt range, which I don't mind here. We can Fate Seal ourselves or Fate Seal the opponent. I think I like Fate Sealing ourselves here, since we've got most of the opponent's stuff covered regardless. And Squadron Hawk, we definitely don't want to bottom, so that's a great draw coming up. Keep our soldiers on defense, not really interested in racing here when we've got a Jace active. Another Bloodcast, that's fine. Opponent should attack with the first one, since they can damage the Jace here. Alright, so let's run out Squadron Hawk. Search up 3 other Squadron Hawks, and our opponent's just gonna scoop it up. Jace plus Squadron Hawk, just too much value, so we'll be back with the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems fine. Basically just missing one of our card advantage engines, so that's probably what we're looking for with the Serum Visions here. And there we go, drew a Jace, perfect, and Squadron Hawk on top. And I think we keep the Colonnade as well, since we can play that on turn 3. Although I guess we will end up shuffling it with the Hawk anyways, so it probably doesn't matter, but I'll keep it on top anyways in case we change our plan here. So pretty much the perfect start here for us. Let's see what we're up against. Llanowar Wastes into Ancient Stirring, so this could be a Lantern deck, and opponent reveals Urza's Mine. Alright, so they're on Tron, which is not a great matchup here for us, let's be honest. We can play out the Squadron Hawk, shuffling away the Colonnade, or we can just Serum Visions and draw the Colonnade and play it this turn, which is probably fine. So let's do that. And Trophy Mage and Logic Knot, so I do like Logic Knot against Tron, and Trophy Mage can search up a sword to increase our clock, so those are both actually pretty good here. So this turn we play the Colonnade, next turn we could just play the Trophy Mage, so I think we put the Trophy Mage first. Let's make sure to play our land. And then if we do play Trophy Mage, I guess we would shuffle away the Logic Knot, so we have to consider that as well. Opponent plays a Mine, and another Ancient Stirrings, so no turn 3 Tron, but opponent's likely to have it on turn 4, as they find a tower here and a map, so that's definitely gonna let them have Tron on turn 4. So what do we do about that? So we can Trophy Mage, get one of our swords. Next turn we can play Jace, then our opponent will have Tron, and then we can play the sword and equip if our Trophy Mage is still around. Hope our opponent has something like a Wormcoil engine instead of a Karn. It's probably our best bet here. Yeah, I think I like that the most here. And Logic Knot is probably not going to counter much when the opponent has so much mana available. Alright, so do we want our Sword of Fire and Ice or Feast and Famine? Fire and Ice kind of increases our clock, but Feast and Famine makes our opponent discard, which could be very relevant and gives us more mana, which I think we want here, so let's get the Feast and Famine. With Jace and Squadron Hawk we have plenty of card advantage already, so the card draw from Fire and Ice seems less relevant. So opponent plays out the tower, they can use a map to get their last Tron piece. Next turn they could be playing something like a Karn, an Ugin. I guess Ugin would be really bad for us. Opponent's just passing, so they're gonna activate the map end of turn. Serum Visions a draw. I think we just jam Jace, hope to brainstorm into a Field of Ruin. We also still need to find land number 5 to play and equip the sword, so let's do that. Let's brainstorm. Alright, there's Field of Ruin, perfect. We definitely want to keep at least 2 lands, so we could put one back. And then I guess we put back the Supreme Verdict, which isn't going to do a whole lot. So let's top that, and then top the plains. And attack for 2, I guess. Alright, so now it all comes down to what win condition our opponent has in hand. If it's a Karn or an Ugin, I don't like our chances. If it's just a creature, we can probably deal with it. And then we do have the Field of Ruin to take out one of the opponent's lands. Opponent gets the power plant, so who knows? There's a power plant, and their opponent with black mana. Is this a Collective Brutality or something? Yep. Opponent takes out our creature and duresses us, essentially, so they can take the path or the Serum Visions. They take the path, could have a follow-up Wormcoil Engine, they do, but we can bounce that with Jace if we want to, so not the end of the world. Can play Squadron Hawk, activate Field of Ruin and Serum Visions, and then we probably want to bounce the Wormcoil Engine. I'm not entirely sure which Tron land we're supposed to destroy, but I guess we just get the last one they search for, which was the power plant. So let's play Squadron Hawk. And we'll get all three. Run out Field of Ruin, destroy the power plant. I guess we could just go for the tower, perhaps, since it is the one that produces more mana. I think I'll go with the tower. And get an island. Opponent can get a basic, and then Serum Visions. Find another Jace, don't need a third one, and don't need a Hallowed Fountain. And then minus, and hope that they can't complete Tron once again. So at least they didn't have the scary Planeswalkers to play here, which is good news. So we might still have a chance. Do they have the tower? They don't, but they have an expedition map, so they can search one up. But they wouldn't be able to play anything too pricey this turn. So we get one turn over Reprieve. 5 mana. Could be a Walking Ballista, I suppose. Just a Chromatic Sphere. And a star. And alright, looks like our opponent doesn't have any removal spells here for the Hawk. So we could potentially just connect with our Sword of Feast and Famine, which is pretty good. Alright, let's untap. First things first, I think we want to brainstorm. Did not find any Field of Ruins, but we did pick up a Negate, which is pretty huge, so let's put back 2 Squadron Hawks. Then we can fetch with our Flooded Strand, get a Hallowed Fountain, run out the sword, equip, and attack. I guess we could have searched up the Hallowed Fountain and put it into play tapped, since we were going to untap it anyways and weren't going to spend that 1 mana. So we took 2 damage for no reason. See what our opponent discards. Discards the power plant. Alright, so second main, I think we play another Jace and brainstorm again. Alright, there's a Field of Ruin. So let's put back Colonnade and Plains. And yeah, hope that this Negate can save us for a turn, and then next turn we'll have Field of Ruin. Not really scared of that Wormcoil Engine. I guess they technically could cast an Ulamog here, since they do have 10 mana, but we do have Detention Sphere to get rid of it. 7 mana for a World Breaker. Alright, that's unfortunate, since can't really counter that one here. And our opponent went after our land. They could have maybe gone after the sword, but I guess the breaker can just block the Squadron Hawk. But that's fine. Let's untap. So we can brainstorm, shuffle with the Field of Ruins, and play Detention Sphere all main phase. That seems fine. So let's start by brainstorming. Alright, another sword is nice. Put back Colonnade and Plains. Then run out Field of Ruin. Blow up the tower. And get a basic. And then Detention Sphere, the World Breaker. Attack with our Hawk. Make our opponent discard. Untap our lands. So we definitely want to keep up Negates. So here we can just play out another sword, I guess. And say go. We also have Spell Snare for Collective Brutality. Opponent still has their Wormcoil Engine in hand. And a Fatal Push that they discarded, which couldn't target the Hawk because of protection from black. Just a Wormcoil recast, that's fine. Got that one covered with Jace for a while. Get to untap. Trophy Mage, so let's see, can we actually kill our opponent here? Not quite, but almost. So this is 5/7, puts the opponent to 1. So let's equip. So we could play it ultra safe, try to brainstorm with Jace to look for another land destruction card, and then use a second Jace to bounce the Wormcoil, but that kind of feels like a waste, so we're just gonna bounce the Wormcoil, play the Hawk right now, get a second one, play that one also, and then attack. Opponent has to discard, we get to draw, that's only fair. Picked up a Remand, so that should lock things up here. Guess we hadn't made our land drop yet, so... Alright, I think I'm fine just saying go here, keeping up all our counter spells. Opponent doesn't have Tron, so they only have 6 mana at the moment. And there we go. Oof, managed to steal game 1 here from Tron. So now we get to bring in Crucible of Worlds, get to bring in Negate, Ceremonious Rejection, Disenchant, Clique I also like, and Detention Sphere can be okay. So those are the cards we definitely want. Don't love Supreme Verdict. Spell Snare seems okay against a version with Collective Brutality and Sylvan Scrying. I'd like our counter spells. Perhaps we don't want the Oust here, so I could see taking that one out. Gideon of the Trials doesn't do a whole lot for us, so I can see taking that one out. Same with maybe Gideon Jura. So I need to take out one more card. I could see shaving a Trophy Mage here. Alright, this seems fine. And this opening hand is pretty interesting. We have 2 copies of Field of Ruin, but no colored mana. Field of Ruin, of course, is the card we want, but it is a bit risky here if we miss on a 3rd land. And if our opponent has the turn 3 Tron, we of course don't have any interaction for that. So it is a bit of a risk, but I think this is actually a pretty good hand, given the circumstances. So I'm gonna keep it and hope that they don't have the turn 3 Tron. Leading with Llanowar Wastes makes me happy, and Inquisition cannot take Field of Ruin, so now all we need to do is draw a 3rd land, preferably a fetch land, so we can get a Hallowed Fountain, but I'm fine with either land here. So what's our opponent gonna take? They take the Trophy Mage, that's fine. Picked up a mana leak, so hopefully that land comes soon, since don't have much going on until we can find one. Opponent with Ancient Stirrings finds Power Plant, and they play it, and the Star as well. And there we go, perfect fetch land, right on time. So this is the one that if we destroy, they still get to draw a card, so definitely not interested in using Disenchant. We'll just leave up mana leak here. There's a tower. They don't know about the mana leak, so they might play into it. Opponent makes black mana with the Star, so they might have another hand disruption spell here, and an Inquisition, so we could mana leak that. So by using mana leak, we basically get to choose that we trade mana leak for Inquisition instead of making the opponent choose, which seems worth it here. I guess this way we have to pay 2 life to get an untapped Hallowed Fountain, but maybe their hand is weak to a card like Path to Exile or Detention Sphere, so it makes sense to mana leak here, I think. And our opponent with a Sylvan Scrying to get the 3rd Tron land. So I think we'll be using the Field of Ruin in draw step, so that our opponent has the opportunity to draw the basic land. Let's see what we draw first. Picked up a Clique, so yeah, let's just put a stop on the opponent's draw step, and then Field of Ruin the tower. And we'll get an island. Opponent plays the Mine, and the Stirrings finds a Karn Liberated. That's a good one to know about. So we have a few options here. We can use a Clique on the opponent's draw step to get rid of their threat in case they have Tron, which they do now thanks to the map. Or we can just use a Field of Ruin to make sure that they can't cast their threat right away, and now picking up another one makes that pretty enticing. We'll have 2 spare mana afterwards as well, so we can even Disenchant. I think we just played safe and use a Field of Ruin here, again in the opponent's draw step, instead of flashing in the Clique, since if our opponent has multiple threats, then we're in a lot of trouble. So let's say go. End of turn, our opponent's gonna use a map, presumably. Nope, they're gonna save it. So let's use Field of Ruin. I think we'll get the Mine. Opponent's gonna tap 1 mana, perhaps to search with the map. Let's get a Plains this time. And they are sacking the map. Alright, so opponent finds an Urza's Tower, they play it, so that's our next target for Field of Ruin. If at any point we can find our Crucible of Worlds, we'll be pretty happy. Although I expect our opponent to have brought in Nature's Claims and the like. Wormcoil Engine found with Ancient Stirrings, have plenty of answers to that one. And Oblivion Stone we can disenchant that right now, which I think we do. So let's untap, find a Colonnade. Unfortunately it's a tap land, so we can't do much besides just using Field of Ruin in draw step once again. Otherwise we could have also flashed in a Clique. So draw step, get rid of the tower, get an island. Opponent with 5 mana, so they're off Tron, but they can just start hardcasting their threats soon. Picked up a Flooded Strand, so now we will draw step Clique them. Could also play the sword here, which we probably do. So let's play the sword, say go, and then draw step, fetch, and get a plains. And then Clique, targeting our opponent. And next turn we might start beating down with the sword on the Clique, which would be pretty exciting. So let's see what they're working with. So they have Urza's Mine to go with the plant, Seagate Wreckage, Wormcoil and Karn. So we have the answer to the Wormcoil, so I think we just take the Karn, which is pretty problematic otherwise. They can't cast it this turn, but they can next turn, and while Detention Sphere does answer it technically, it's not really a clean answer, so let's take the Karn. Opponent does get to play their Wormcoil, we get to equip the sword and attack. And then we have either Detention Sphere or Path to Exile to answer the Wormcoil. Found a Glacial Fortress, so let's equip. And don't have enough mana to also attack with the Colonnade here, but next turn we can start doing that. So let's attack. Opponent has to discard. We get to untap our lands, not that it really matters here. And they discarded the Thoughtseize. So let's pass a turn. I guess there's no reason to path right now, we can probably let them attack first. They still know about the path and Detention Sphere from our opening hand, I believe. So it's not gonna come as a surprise. Opponent with the Seagate Wreckage, and now we'll path. No more basics for the opponent. And what's their last card? The Nature's Claim on the sword. Yep, that works. So their opponent's empty-handed, but they have a Seagate Wreckage. They don't have Tron, but they pretty much have all the lands they need. And they're gonna use a Seagate Wreckage right now, it looks like. But we can start beating down for 7, put the opponent to 5, so our opponent's almost dead, but they have a few draw steps here to get them out of it. So let's activate Colonnade. Attack for 7. And I don't think we play out our Glacial Fortress, since if our opponent pluses Karn for some reason, we want the Detention Sphere to answer him. So let's say go. Did our opponent find an answer? Wormcoil doesn't do it, since we can just fly over. Karn kind of does it, but only buys them a couple turns. So let's see what they do with the Karn. They have to minus, otherwise they're dead. So do they go after the Colonnade or the Clique? They go for the Colonnade. So we could just kill Karn with the Clique. Now we picked up a Trophy Mage, so we can play the Trophy Mage, find an equipment, but don't have enough mana to also equip. We're definitely playing Trophy Mage, so we can start by doing that. I guess we can get Crucible of Worlds. That seems pretty appealing as well. Didn't think of that. Yeah, well, let's get a Crucible. And we don't have a Ghost Quarter in the graveyard, so we can't actually take our opponent off of mana this turn, but we can just replay a Field of Ruin and then use it next turn. And then I guess we're attacking Karn, since otherwise we don't have mana to play the Detention Sphere, so that seems fine. Play the Crucible. Play Field of Ruin. And attack Karn. And we still have 5 power for next turn to maybe kill our opponent if they don't have anything. And it's also a bit safer in case our opponent has a Nature's Claim for the Sphere, so they don't get to reactivate Karn. So I think that worked out fine. Let's see if they have another heavy hitter here. Ancient Stirrings to look for one. They still don't have Tron, so they can't play an Ulamog or an Ugin here. Opponent finds a Sphere, so they get a redraw. Perhaps if they boarded in something like Thragtusk, they can survive for a couple more turns. Opponent makes green mana. Is this a Collective Brutality? It is. So they're just killing the Clique. Alright, so they get one more turn here. And they do have Tron, but they're just gonna use a Seagate Wreckage, it looks like. So they have one card left, and it's a map. They should probably wait on using the map since we have Field of Ruin. But we can Field of Ruin them twice next turn, so it doesn't really matter. And our opponent scoops it up, so they can't beat the Crucible of Worlds with double Field of Ruin. Can't blame them. And there we go, managed to beat Black-Green Tron with our Blue-White Caw Blade deck. Not an easy matchup, got a little bit lucky in game 1 that they only had the Wormcoil Engine as a finisher. And in game 2, Field of Ruin did a lot of work. So I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series, so if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.